What happened in the next 90 minutes made a lifelong spider keeper question everything she thought she knew about arachnid intelligence. A single jumping spider, barely the size of a grain of rice, was about to make a choice that shouldn't have been possible. Her name was Willow, and she was standing at the open door of her enclosure, free to walk into 100 acres of Oregon forest, when she did something no one on that porch expected. She turned around. 3 months earlier, Willow had been found in the corner of a garage window, spinning silk against the glass like she was trying to answer a question nobody had asked her. A bold jumping spider, jet black with a shimmer of iridescent green across her chelicerae, the kind of spider most people would flick away without a second look. But her keeper looked twice. It was late January, well below freezing outside, the kind of cold that kills almost anything without fur or feathers within hours. A spider that size, caught in that window, had exactly two outcomes: freeze against the glass by morning, or get picked up. She was scooped into a plastic cup with a piece of cardboard slid underneath, the classic catch and release move, except this time there was no release. Not yet. Outside, the thermometer read 19 degrees. Nothing small and cold-blooded was surviving that. So a decision got made in about 4 seconds. The kind of decision that quietly changes the next several months of two very different lives. She'd stay inside until spring. She was moved into a small terrarium that afternoon. Nothing fancy. A few inches of cocoa fiber, a curl of bark to hide under, a water dish smaller than a bottle cap. For 3 months, that terrarium was Willow's entire universe. She was never handled, never let out to explore a desk or a hand or a sleeve, the way some spider owners do with their more confident pets. The rule was simple. Open the lid, drop in a cricket or a fruit fly, close the lid. That was the entire relationship. A shadow that came, fed her, and left. And yet, something was happening behind those 8 eyes that no one had accounted for. Jumping spiders don't see the world the way most insects do. Most arthropods rely on motion detection, a blur of movement triggering a reflex. Willow's vision worked differently. Her 2 enormous front eyes function almost like a pair of telephoto lenses, capable of resolving fine detail and, according to researchers who study the genus, distinguishing shapes as specific as a human face from a few inches away. She had 4 more eyes scattered around her head, giving her nearly 360-degree awareness. Nothing approached that enclosure without her knowing. So for 3 months, every single day, Willow watched the same shape appear at the same time from the same angle, and it never once hurt her. That's not nothing. That's data. There was a routine to it, the kind of routine that any animal, vertebrate or not, eventually starts to anticipate. Mornings brought light through the kitchen window. A little later, the shadow arrived. The lid lifted. Something small and wriggling dropped in. The lid closed again. Willow learned to wait near the top of her enclosure around that time of day, legs tucked, eyes forward, in a posture that looked a lot like anticipation. Jumping spiders are unusual among arthropods because they don't just react to their environment, they seem to actively predict it. In laboratory settings, researchers have watched Salticidae solve simple detour problems, planning a path around an obstacle they can no longer see, holding the destination in memory the entire time. That's not reflex. That's something closer to forward planning, a skill most invertebrates simply don't have the neural hardware for. Willow had 1 more month of growth ahead of her before that spring release, and in that time, she molted once more, each shed of her exoskeleton revealing a slightly larger, slightly bolder spider underneath. Bold jumping spiders earn their common name honestly. Unlike more skittish species that flee at the first sign of movement, this genus tends to stand its ground, rear up, and study whatever's approaching before deciding whether it's a threat, a meal, or simply irrelevant. By April, Willow wasn't just tolerating the presence at her enclosure door, she was tracking it. The moment a shadow crossed the terrarium glass, her whole body would pivot, front eyes locking onto the movement with a precision that looked almost unsettling coming from something so small. By late spring, she had grown fast, molted twice, and clearly outgrown the little terrarium. It was time. The plan was simple. Release her onto a fallen log pile at the edge of the property, thick with moss and old bark beetles. Exactly the kind of habitat a bold jumping spider dreams about. Perfect shelter, endless food, freedom. The morning of the release, the forecast finally cooperated. 68 degrees, light wind, the kind of soft, golden light that photographers wait weeks for. The log pile itself had been sitting untouched at the edge of the property for at least a decade, half swallowed by moss, riddled with the kind of insect life that makes a predator's life easy. Carpenter ants moving in steady lines, springtails flicking across the bark. A whole miniature ecosystem, built and ready, waiting for exactly one tenant. The container was set down gently in a patch of dappled sunlight. The lid came off, and Willow didn't move. For the first several minutes, she simply sat at the threshold, front legs raised slightly, palps twitching. Anyone who has ever released a rescued animal back into the wild knows this pause. It's the moment before commitment, when instinct and uncertainty are having a quiet argument. Then she started exploring, but not in the direction anyone predicted. She moved along the rim of the container first, tracing its edge the way she might trace the walls of her old terrarium. Slow, deliberate steps. Every few seconds, she'd stop and pivot her whole body toward the person kneeling a few feet away, holding the camera. Not a glance, a stare. The kind of directed attention you'd expect from a dog hearing its name, not an arachnid the size of a fingernail. Curiosity researchers who study jumping spider cognition have a term for this kind of behavior: visually guided orientation. It means the spider isn't just reacting to motion, she's actively choosing where to look, based on what she's already identified as significant. And somehow, in this new and completely unfamiliar forest, the most significant thing in Willow's world wasn't the moss, or the bark, or the beetles crawling through the log pile inches from her legs. It was the person who fed her. She finally stepped off the rim and onto the log itself. This should have been the end of the story. A spider walks into the woods, and the camera watches her disappear into the leaf litter forever. That's how every release video goes. Except Willow paused again and looked back. Then she did something that made the person filming actually laugh out loud in disbelief. She turned around, crossed back over the log, and climbed up onto the toe of her keeper's boot. Nobody was reaching for her. Nobody was luring her with food. She'd been fed that same morning, and her abdomen was round and healthy, nowhere close to the flattened look of a hungry spider on the hunt. There was no reason, in the strict textbook sense, for her to come back. And yet here she was, working her way up the laces, pausing every few steps to look up at the enormous shape looming above her. This is where things start to get genuinely strange, even for people who've spent years around jumping spiders. Because a hungry spider climbing toward a hand makes sense. A spider looking for warmth on a cold morning makes sense. But it was warm. She was fed. And the log pile behind her had more food crawling through it than she could eat in a week. So why was she still climbing? Recognition studies on salticity, the jumping spider family, have shown these animals can be trained to associate specific visual stimuli, shapes, colors, patterns, with either reward or threat, and they retain that association over surprisingly long periods for a creature with a brain smaller than a poppy seed. Some researchers have documented spiders forming what looks a lot like a preference for a familiar handler over a stranger, responding with defensive posturing to unknown shapes while remaining calm around the person who regularly interacts with them. There's also the matter of hearing, or something close to it. Jumping spiders don't have ears in any conventional sense, but sensitive hairs on their legs and body can detect airborne vibration from several feet away, well beyond what scientists once assumed possible for a creature this size. Some species have even been shown to respond to specific frequencies, including, strangely enough, the wing beat of a mud dauber wasp, one of their most efficient predators. A spider that can hear a threat coming can very plausibly also learn to recognize the particular cadence of a familiar voice, or the particular rhythm of familiar footsteps. Nobody was talking to Willow that afternoon, but the ground was carrying vibration all the same, and she seemed to know exactly where it was coming from. Calm isn't the same as attachment. Scientists are careful about that distinction, and so should we be. But watching Willow deliberately backtrack across unfamiliar terrain, ignoring an entire ecosystem built exactly for her, just to climb back toward one specific silhouette, makes it very hard not to wonder where the line actually sits. She reached the top of the boot and stopped there, front legs raised again, and did something jumping spiders are famous for. She tilted her cephalothorax slightly to one side, almost like tilting her head, bringing those two huge front eyes into sharper focus. It's a movement that looks unmistakably like curiosity. It's also, according to vision researchers, exactly how these spiders fine-tune depth perception, using tiny head movements to triangulate distance the way we might squint to bring something into focus. She wasn't performing for the camera. She was actively studying a face she had apparently already learned to recognize. The keeper crouched lower, careful not to breathe too hard, and gently offered a fingertip near the boot, not to pick her up, just to see what she'd do. Willow stepped onto it without hesitation. No flinch, no defensive rear-up, no flash of fangs, none of the threat displays jumping spiders are quick to throw at anything unfamiliar. Just a small, deliberate step from boot to fingertip, like she'd done it 100 times before, even though she never had. For a moment, everything on that porch went quiet. Even the birds seemed to pause. Anyone who has kept more than one jumping spider will tell you they are not interchangeable. They have personalities, distinct enough that keepers give them names and half-joking descriptions. This one's shy, that one's a menace, this one refuses to eat anything but moths. Willow had always been on the bolder end of that spectrum, the kind of spider that reared up to inspect a new cricket rather than ambush it from hiding, the kind that seemed, if you squinted, almost curious about her own enclosure rather than merely trapped in it. That personality had followed her out here, into 100 acres of forest that owed her nothing and offered everything. And instead of vanishing into it the way instinct alone would predict, she'd chosen, for these few minutes at least, something else entirely. This is the part of the story that's easy to sentimentalize and important not to. Willow is not a dog. She doesn't have the neural architecture for anything resembling loyalty in the mammalian sense, but she does have something scientists are only beginning to fully map, a working memory system sophisticated enough to plan multi-step hunting routes days in advance, to backtrack around obstacles she can no longer see, to essentially hold a mental map of her surroundings and update it as she moves. A spider that can do that is a spider capable of forming an association between a shape and safety, and acting on that association even when there's no immediate reward on the table. She sat on that fingertip for almost 2 full minutes, grooming one leg, watching the tree line, watching the face above her, behaving for all the world like she was deciding something. Then, just as suddenly as she'd climbed on, she leapt. Not away, sideways, onto the nearest branch of the log pile, landing with the kind of pinpoint precision jumping spiders are named for, a controlled aerial launch guided entirely by that extraordinary depth perception, calculating distance and trajectory in a fraction of a second most predators would need far longer to process. She'd made her decision, and it wasn't the one anyone expected. She stayed on that branch, facing outward toward the woods for the first time since the lid had come off. Then she started to move, this time with real purpose, into the deep moss between the logs, into the world she was born for. It would have been easy to end the story there. Instead, she stopped one more time. At the edge of visibility, half swallowed by shadow, she turned back one final time. 2 enormous eyes catching the last of the afternoon light. A long pause. And then she was gone. Into the log pile, into the beetles and the moss and the decades of decomposing bark that would, from that moment forward, be entirely her own kingdom. Nobody saw her again after that. No dramatic follow-up. No second appearance at the door the next morning. Just the quiet, ordinary business of a wild animal returning to a wild life, exactly as it should. But something about those 90 minutes refused to sit quietly. Because somewhere between the boot and the branch, a creature most people are taught to fear, to flick away, to avoid, had made a choice that looked unmistakably like recognition, like preference, like the smallest, strangest flicker of connection between 2 species that have almost nothing in common except the ability to notice each other. Scientists will tell you, correctly, that we should be careful about projecting human emotion onto an animal with a brain the size of a poppy seed. And they're right to say it, but they'll also tell you that jumping spiders are, pound for pound, among the most cognitively sophisticated invertebrates on Earth, capable of planning, learning, and yes, recognizing the shapes that matter to them. Willow didn't stay behind because she needed to. She paused because for a few months, in a small terrarium in Oregon, a jumping spider had learned that one particular shape in the world meant she was safe. And when she was finally free to leave that behind completely, she needed just one more look before she let it go. Somewhere in that log pile tonight, Willow is exactly where she's supposed to be, hunting in the dark, navigating by memory and moonlight, using eyes built to see farther than almost anything her size has any right to see. But for 90 minutes on an ordinary spring afternoon, she reminded one person, and maybe now you too, that the line between instinct and awareness might be a lot blurrier than we've ever been willing to admit.